Welcome to lesson 2 of course 1. Course 1 being desire, narrative and the formation of self. And today in lesson 2 we're going to look at relational movements. Now those of you who, as myself, grew up in a Christian culture might have experienced the same kind of framework of understanding in which our whole existence was divided up into two worlds or two dimensions. The world of the spirit and the world of material, the visible and the invisible. And basically the temporal, the world that is seen, everything here is temporal and ultimately would be destroyed. It's imperfect. But the world of the spirit is what was eternal and what was changeless and what was perfect. Now the same understanding spilled over into how we described ourselves. Self was also divided up into two parts, the physical reality and the spirit reality. However, whenever one starts to probe, what do you mean by spirit? That question very quickly reveals that we haven't given that part much thought. So today what we're going to do is we're going to examine where these ideas came from, how they developed. This dualistic understanding of what makes you human has a history. There's a philosophical history and the discussion between theologians and philosophers that has been ongoing for many years. It began basically with the early church fathers and their discussions with Hellenistic philosophers. Now, those categories of understanding within which they conversed was very helpful at that time. But within philosophy, another revolution has taken place over the past few thousand years. But unfortunately, theology remained stuck in these 3rd century categories of understanding, to a large extent. Not all of theology, obviously, it's very broad, and there are many people who have continued to think and develop their ideas. But specifically, this dualistic view of self, I believe, is an effect of these early discussions with Hellenistic philosophers that's in a great need of an update in language and understanding. So let me scroll down here and make sure that I don't leave everything out. So let's look a little bit at the history. Let's start with Plato. Plato loved ideas. He looked around him and discovered that everything in this world is temporal. It continually changes. There's nothing that can be finally and accurately and completely preserved and defined. But in the abstract world of ideas, Plato found the changeless perfection that he loved so much. And so this dualistic philosophy began with a very simple question. And that question was, how do we describe the essence of a thing? Plato suggested that there is something called the essence that within everything that never changes, and there are accidental attributes that can change without changing the substance or the essence of a thing. And so he developed this elaborate category of understanding in which the essence, whether it's a plant, a chair, a table, the essence derived its changeless nature from a spirit realm, this realm of perfect ideas. So in his understanding, in this heavenly realm of perfect ideas, there's the perfect chair, there's the perfect tree. And everything that is seen, that we experience, is a copy of that perfect idea. Maybe it's best to put this into a simple example. Let's take a bottle of wine. Now, for Plato, there is the ideal and the perfect bottle of wine in the heavenly realm. And every other bottle of wine derives its essence from that perfect form. Its relationships, there's a lot of relationships involved in producing wine. The vine needs to be placed and planted at a certain place. It has a relationship to the soil, to the weather. It has a relationship to the farmer who tends it, to the winemaker who takes the process further, develops and matures the wine, to the way it's stored. There's a lot of relationships involved in producing a wine. But in Plato's philosophy, what gives that wine essence is its relationship to this heavenly perfect form of what the ideal wine is. And the relationships are simply accidental and doesn't really have an influence on its essence. Now, today we know that relationship is really absolutely essential in what gives substance to a wine. It is the relationships of the vine and the environment, of the water, the soil, the people tending it, the processes. It is the summary of all these relationships that is the essence of that wine. And should you change any of those relationships, you do change the essence of that wine. So today, philosophical categories and understanding have developed in which we no longer entertain just magical thinking. We actually understand the profound reality that relationship has on every substance. Now, the way in which we developed from Plato to where we are today is a profound and beautiful, revolutionary story of how philosophy developed. And, in the lesson, I've got much more specific examples. And Laron Schultz's book, Reforming Theological Anthropology, gives a much more comprehensive summary of how this change from substance metaphysics, which is the idea of Plato that there's a spiritual substance, how that has changed into what we call relationality, that it is actually relationship that gives substance to everything. Let me give a quick synopsis of this development. David Hume made a convincing argument against the very idea of substance in dialogues concerning natural religion. Immanuel Kant continued the same argument and showed that we do not know things in themselves or in their substance, but as they appear to us. He also proposed a new table of categories in which substance and accident became a subcategory of relation. Now that's a huge change, because before then we had Aristotle's categories of understanding in which substance was the main category and relationship, the fourth category, was more of an attribute that did not affect substance. So, Immanuel Kant completely changed our categories of understanding to show that everything, substance included, is subject to relationship. Hegel showed that we cannot separate relationship from substance, but that reflective movement is being itself. Now, I give a lot more extracts from the book in the actual written lesson, but in summary, a revolutionary change has taken place in philosophy. Interestingly enough, the Nicene Creed was written within these ancient categories of understanding, and that is why they had such great difficulty trying to explain how the substance of humanity and the substance of divinity dwells within one human being, Jesus Christ. There was, and why their definition was always prone to heresy in one way or the other way. It's because the category of understanding was very limited. Today, again, concepts such as hypostatic union is very popular in some circles, but very little is understood about these categories of understanding that gave birth to these ideas. And very little is done to actually examine them. And so to a large extent, theology remains stuck in these 3rd century categories of understanding. Well, I'm excited that we are starting to explore and take it further, finding new language to make this beautiful message of Christ relevant to daily life again, instead of just continuing to dwell in our abstract theories of language that very few people still find understandable or relevant. So let me summarize this. We, as we said in the previous lessons, are not going to be that stuck in making static statements about the substance of who you are, the substance of who God is. In fact, the scriptures themselves are not that interested in making statements about the substance of God or the substance of humanity. They are much more interested in describing the relationship we have with one another, with ourselves, and with God. And that should give us a clue as to the basis of their understanding. In fact, 1 John 4:7 makes it clear that knowing God is not the kind of knowledge that you have regarding an object. I do not know God the way I know anything else in terms of just describing its attributes. But knowing God only takes place in the dynamic act of loving another. Can you see how this knowledge is all wrapped up in the dynamic movement of relationship? I look forward to this week's discussions and how we take it further in the weeks to come as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.